Hey, thanks for clicking on the video. Today we are checking out the #1 Titan build. This build is fantastic for ad clear, handling mini bosses, and dealing real damage inside raids or dungeons. We're talking a chill 490% increase to our outgoing melee damage with the best weapons in the game to boot. This build will also be future-proof for renegades, including some slight optional changes to use that new exotic that literally lets you fly. Now, before we dive into the build itself, if you've seen my content before, which a lot of you have, I would love it if you did subscribe. I do my best to put out informative and somewhat entertaining Destiny 2 content, and with Renegades launching next month, you'll definitely want to see what we get up to. Also, if you are a returning viewer, then joining the Discord server that I have linked down below would also mean a ton to me. And then for the usual build stuff, there is a dim link also in the description. That way you can take it super easily. There are also timestamps down below so that if you're looking for the ability choices or maybe just the armor mods, you can click and get that information instantly. But now, continuing on to the actual build itself, the first thing I want to show you guys is our melee. For this build, we will be using Thunderclap. This melee has received a ton of buffs over the years and is now in such an incredible spot. Just looking at its base performance, a full charged Thunderclap deals 1,405 damage. If we compare that to the previous top tier Titan build that focused on the Consecration melee ability, that melee deals 1,159 damage. What's more about Thunderclap though, is that when in the charge up animation, you get so much damage resist that you're pretty much unkillable. So today we're going to focus quite a bit on this ability while also keeping an eye on the future because there looks to be some interesting stuff with this and an exotic coming in Renegades. But before that, we have the actual exotic we are using today, that being an insurmountable Skullfort. This exotic reads, final blows with arc melees trigger health regeneration and fully restore a melee charge. Melee hits grant arc melee energy. So taking a look at the first and most obvious thing, whenever we get a kill with our Thunderclap, it is instantly recharged. That recharge allows us to immediately start the next melee, and as you saw in the beginning, at base, this does a ton of damage, giving so much value to the act of spamming it. As for the non-instant regeneration, if we hit something with the ability itself but do not score a kill, we will receive 50% of our melee back rather than a full charge. And then if we use no abilities and just use our default melee, that will give us about 5% back per hit. And then the last little detail here is that if we use the arc aspect knockout, more details on this in a second, when landing default melees with that active, we get about 15% of our melee back on hit. And then for the last bit about the exotic itself, melee kills will start health regeneration, which is really nice, and you can see here that it is uninterruptible. So you get a ton of health back on kills. Now, usually this is where we move on to the subclass or exotic weapons in my videos, but I wanted to briefly mention the new Praxic Vestment exotic coming in Renegades. Its description apparently states, gain an air move jetpack, weapon and arc powered melee final blows build up jetpack fuel. This means by using Thunderclap, which is what this build largely focuses on, we can swap out Insurmountable Skullfort for Praxic Vestment and be able to literally fly. If melee regen does become an issue with that build, then you can always use something like Monte Carlo or a weapon with Pugilist. Both of those will allow you to regen your melee off of damage kills. Although I'm not going to dive too much more into a build with that new exotic today, but do keep note that this is a path going forward. And to be honest, you can probably look out for a build with that exotic on this channel when I get my hands on it next month. But now back to the current day build. Like I had mentioned, this might be where we talk about an exotic weapon. And today we have nothing because all the best builds do not restrict your weapon loadout. So moving on, we have our prismatic subclass to discuss. Starting with our super of choice, you can use either Thunder Crash for the boss damage and instant DPS, or you can use Glacial Quake or Blade Fury because those two supers are really cracked if you're going for ad clear. They actually even do great boss damage too, but mainly only inside non-raid activities. For the class ability, we will be using a Thruster. This ability just feels really nice to use and is on the shortest cooldown. For our melee, we already know that we have Thunderclap equipped. Then our grenade is Glacier Grenade for its versatility and the ability to combo with Thunderclap for a lot of damage. But then for our first aspect, we have the aforementioned Knockout. This aspect says that upon breaking a shield or getting a combatant critically wounded, which is about 30% of their health, we will get our melee range and damage increased. It also states that melee kills heal us and make us amplified. Taking a look at this in action, the easiest way to describe and show you how you will be using this is that when you get a kill or close to it, knockout is going to activate. This buff lasts 6 seconds and will increase our melee damage by 160%. That means our previous Thunderclap that dealt 1,405 damage now deals 3,651. It also increases our basic melee damage, going from 252 to 654. But this massive damage increase is what allows this ability to nuke pretty much everything. As for the other effects though, any melee kill will now also heal us, and we can pair this with our exotic armor piece to get so much health back on melee kills. We also now have a very easy and instant source of Amplify, which is a 15% damage resist, as well as being an invasion boost. Now, back in our subclass, we have our second aspect. And with this build having the absence of Consecration, we can choose whatever. And this time, it's going to be Diamond Lance. This aspect states that upon any ability kill, we spawn a Stasis Lance that we can use and do multiple things with. Showing off spawning it, like I said, any ability kill will do so. Then once we pick it up, we can do two things. We can throw it to do a bit of damage and freeze everything around the impact. It is quite a small AoE though. Or we can use our melee key while holding one and slam it to the ground, which will also freeze everything in a larger radius, but will simultaneously give us a couple stacks of Frost Armor. Frost Armor is another source of DR, going up by 6% per stack. Now, when it comes to this aspect, the ability to freeze things on command and give us more survivability is great on its own. We can also abuse the fact that frozen enemies take a bit more ability damage. In this example, we can see our melee that dealt 3,651 damage now deals 3,834 while this guy is frozen. I would say though, don't always try to match up knockout with a frozen enemy. Just don't think about it and know that sometimes we're getting both benefits simultaneously. Now moving on to the final bit of our subclass, we have our fragments. The first fragment we choose is Facet of Protection. This is another source of damage resist that will activate when nearby at least 3 enemies. In this build, that is all the time, making this a no-brainer pick. The next fragment is Facet of Hope. This will fast track our thruster ability whenever we have any buff active. Most often, this is going to be amplified. The next fragment is very important, and this one is Facet of Command. This states that freezing or suppressing enemies reloads our weapons. It will also spawn stasis shards whenever we defeat frozen enemies. Stasis shards, if you can't recall, will give us a small chunk of melee ability energy back whenever we pick them up. This is going to be a fantastic way to re-up on our melee if we ever happen to lose it, or if we're using that new Prax Investment exotic. This will allow us to get our melee back without needing Insurmountable Skullfort. And then our next fragment is Facet of Dawn, which will make us radiant whenever we deal powered melee damage. So if we hit something with our Thunderclap or knockout melee, we become radiant, increasing our weapon damage. Also great for anti-barrier reasons. And then the final fragment is Facet of Courage, so our light abilities deal more damage to dark debuffed enemies, which means even more damage against frozen enemies or a harder hitting T-Crash against bosses. Taking a quick peek at that increase, our new highest value is 4,571 damage. Now, coming out of our subclass, to quickly touch on weapons that are particularly good in this build, you can use the usual Mint Retrograde plus whatever energy weapon. Or if you wanted a bit more synergy, then you could use a stasis weapon that freezes enemies. Something with Headstone or Chill Clip like Tenacious Mastery would be fantastic. And lastly, a 1-2 punch shotgun or hand cannon will increase our damage a ton, but it can be pretty finicky, so I wouldn't force it. This build is good enough already. But now onto our armor stats. The obvious thing to go for in this build is 200 melee stat. As for secondary stats, having 100 super and high class is generally desirable. This will keep these abilities at their highest uptime. I will say don't force 200 melee if the rest of your stats suck. As you can see here, I only have 155, and it's more than enough to be honest. As for the rest of the stats, you can just largely forget them, that being health, grenade, and weapons. But before moving on from these stats, what does 200 melee damage look like for damage? Well, our previous best was 4,571, and now it's 5,942 damage from one ability. But continuing on, we have our armor mods now. This build has on its helmet a special ammo finder and a siphon that matches your most used weapon. On the arms, we have triple heavy-handed for only 1 second between spawning orbs on melee kills. On the chest piece, we run resist and an ammo generation mod. This will be very important when Mint Retrograde loses ammo and renegades. On the legs, we have an invigoration for melee energy on orb pickup. This is a nice plan B if we lose our melee. We have an absolution to get class ability and a bit of everything back on orb pickup, and then a scavenger for whatever special weapon you might be using. And then on the class item, you guessed it, a special finisher for free special ammo on command, a powerful attraction to suck up all nearby orbs whenever we thruster, and a proximity ward so that we become nearly invincible when doing finishers. Now, for our final topic, we have the artifact. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Ignore it. There is so little time left in the season that I'm recording this in, I don't want you to think that this relies on the artifact at all. But because I can showcase a larger number, if we include Shield Crush, which is an artifact perk all about increasing melee damage, as you can see here, if we take that and a 1-2 punch hand cannon, our new highest melee damage goes up to 8,299 in one ability. But like I said, that's mainly just for fun. This is a future-proofed build that you can take into Renegades and even adapt with that new exotic, so you don't really need to worry about this. But now, to close out this video, we have the gameplay loop. Begin, start meleeing. When in the early stages of the gameplay loop, you will likely want to leverage more fully charged thunderclaps, but once you have knockout procced off of your first kill, you can then start decreasing the amount of time you wait for fully charged melees. If you see a red bar, usually just a tap is more than enough to kill it, and while you're killing things, diamond lances will be spawning. Pick these up and throw them or slam them for increased damage resist. While being in the fight and using your lances and thunderclaps, you'll be amplified, have frost armor, have protection activated, as well as constant healing. All of this makes you extremely hard to remove from the battlefield. The loop should realistically be thunderclap, in a thunderclap, in a thunderclap, etc. If you ever accidentally do not kill an enemy with your melee, like you use it on a champion or something, you should have 50% generated immediately, which you can then use your default melee or pick up an orb or pick up a stasis shard from a frozen enemy to get the rest of your melee back. This build is straight up so easy to execute and it outputs so much damage. Remember to use your Glacier Grenade to combo with your Thunderclap for some burst damage, and of course you have Thruster to pick up orbs without going near them. Also, do remember that you have Transcendence, which you can use for even more damage resist and ability spam. And then pop your super when you have it, or if you get in a sticky spot. There's going to be no shortage of supers. The only time that you really need to use your weapons in this build is when something is too far away to punch. And that's actually it with this build. Super simple, it's going to be really good for a very long time, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for getting this far into the video. Your viewership is greatly appreciated. If you want to support me, support the channel, a like, a comment, a subscription goes a very long way. If you want to support me, support the channel, but you can't think of a comment down below Star Wars, because the Star Wars DLC is very soon, and I'm actually getting pretty excited. And with that, as usual, I hope you are having a great day, and I hope to see you around.